Good morning and welcome to ASL's HR in 10. As you know, I'm Jason Perry, and most Thursday mornings, Kimberly, Bradshaw and I get together and talk about some of the latest developments in HR. Slight change of plan this week. Kimberly, bless her, isn't available to join us, so I'm delighted at short notice to have Paula Sanders, who's the HR manager from Chaffin Works, to join us. So let me just bring her in and see if the technology is working for this. Paula, good morning. Are you with us?
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Paula. And
Good.
thank you so much for joining us at short notice.
No worries, I'm delighted.
I've invited Paula to join us as she is, as I would describe, the model of excellence in HR management. So no pressure now, Paula. What I thought would be good was to talk about some of the approach you've taken at Chaffin to managing this crisis. Over the past few weeks, Kimberly and I have talked about things about testing strategies, about approach to vaccination, and about mental health and emotional well-being. So I know you've done quite a bit of work on this. Let's start with testing. You've implemented some degree of employee testing, haven't you?
Yeah, we did back when NHS testing sort of became a bit more prevalent and the test and trace system came out. There was that small blip of the non-availability really for people to get tested. And just to reassure staff, just to reassure ourselves that we were on top of everything, we managed to get ourselves some tests, train some in-house managers. And yeah, we were able to provide testing where we couldn't get hold of NHS testing, which is still, my preferable way of dealing with it. But yeah, we were able to at least get first ideas of whether we had a problem, whether someone had, a COVID at all, and that we could deal with it really, really quickly and get on top of that.
Yeah. And how did that go down with your people? How did they respond to that when you kind of said, we want to do this?
Incredibly well. They're very, very good at participating. We work in the construction sector predominantly, so health and safety is sort of key to what we do. So there is sort of a normality, if you like, between a sort of more regimented, more sort of structured approach to that kind of thing. But no, they were really on board with it, and we actually had people proactively asking, can I be tested? I don't feel well. Can I be tested by the company? I don't feel comfortable going to an NHS centre. So, I think they really took it on board really, really well, and were quite pleased that we were proactive in what we were doing.
Yeah, superb. And when you've looked at the whole COVID safety of the workforce, has that gone in the same kind of way? Have you had the same positive take-up when you've started demanding masks? Or talk us through how you've handled that.
Yeah, well, again, like I say, in the construction industry, we're led a lot by risk assessments. Every job that we attend has its own risk assessment attached. So that world for us is pretty normal. So when we had to do our own COVID risk assessment for the whole business, we actually shared that straight away. That first draft went out to all of our staff, all of our operatives, across all of the businesses and all of the offices, and we asked for their input. We have that kind of thing going on anyway. We have regular health and safety forums that they can attend where genuinely the management is put on the spot by the staff. It's all, minuted. We have to come back with answers. So again, we've already got that culture already set up. So they're quite used to being consulted, included in those kind of discussions, which is really good because it meant that we could write an assessment, ask them if we'd missed anything. Are there any loopholes that we just haven't thought of from a site-based perspective? Which I think means that they sort of felt, A, that we were really looking at it, B, because we included them, they felt that they really were participating in it.
Yeah.
And again, with regular updates and statements from us, just to reassure them and just sort of remind them of the key points of that risk assessment, they sort of felt that it was constant but supportive.
Yeah. And I know one of the things you and I have talked about before, I hope you don't mind me raising it in this format, but I know you and I have talked about before, is the, within the wider economy, the kind of whistleblowing approach. Because I think there's a figure out there that something like 51% of employees have whistleblown in some way during this crisis. And you said a really interesting thing to me a couple of weeks ago on this point. So do you want to talk about how you handle when people do have concerns?
Yeah, I mean, again, we have a very open culture. Again, the construction was sort of based around that kind of thing. So the expectation is if something goes wrong, if something you feel isn't right, it isn't a case of whistleblowing as such. It's a report it straight up the chain of command. That's it. You report everything. And it always has to get dealt with. So we use things. We use a little app for what we call near misses, which are instances that may have caused an issue. It even goes as far as feedback to us, proactive things that the guys have done as well, where they've seen something, they've proactively tried to prevent a problem that maybe somebody else was causing. And utilising those kinds of things means that I don't think anyone feels that they can't raise an issue.
Yeah.
It's sort of normal and natural in our world to say, I don't think this is right, or I don't think you thought about this, or actually this happened on site, we need to address it. And it just allows us to be very reactive as management team to get on top of those things instantly. And that is an instant system that we're using as well. So anything comes through and it needs to be dealt with, it'll be dealt with immediately.
Yeah. I mean, you've effectively developed a culture where any criticism is welcome and any feedback is good.
Absolutely. And that works at every level as well. And every member of staff has the ability to speak directly to any of our directors as well. Everyone is freely available to every member of staff. So there isn't sort of a specific chain of command, as it were, that they have to follow. They can speak to whoever they feel comfortable. If they feel comfortable talking to me, then I'm the one that will raise it with the directors and move on from there.
Superb. Let's talk, I mean, HR in 10, we're trying to fit a lot in 10 minutes. We've still got a little bit left, but let's talk a little bit about the kind of emotional well-being and mental health. I think ACAS have described it yesterday as they hope the enlightened approach to emotional well-being may be the silver lining of this crisis. And how do you take your approach to emotional well-being and those type of issues within Chaffin?
Really seriously, I mean, construction, it's known in construction that about 13% of all workplace suicides were in construction between 2011 and 2015. Right. It's a massive number. And obviously with some of the plant, those kinds of things, let's say, there is a higher risk available to people rather than maybe working in an office. So there's always been a construction industry approach to mental health and well-being. A lot of it would be like mental health first aid, those kinds of things. We've chosen not to use mental health first aid as we've chosen to do a more relaxed approach in that all managers are aware of potential issues that might come up, potential pointers. So, for example, someone being excessively happy very suddenly for no apparent reason, which is, again, a key point. Again, tired, stressed, anything like that. And all of our managers are just aware, just have that very basic conversation, and a very basic conversation at that, which is, are you okay? Yeah. Do you need to talk to anyone? And we don't sort of try and diagnose people. We have an employee assistance program in place with paid, qualified people that know what they're doing. Yeah. I don't want to hear about, we're not qualified to do this. I don't expect anyone to be, but that's what we utilise. And when we really need to, we'll get in extra help. We'll buy in specialist help for staff if it is needed. And we really do pride ourselves in the fact that we look after our staff. And when they do have issues, we want to get them back into work, not only because it makes us money, bluntly, the bottom line, but because they're our massive asset. Our company is nothing without our staff. We need them healthy, we need them working, and we want to get them back into work as soon as possible. And obviously we don't want to lose revenue potentially to top off. I mean, when you think that potentially, £2.4 billion a year is lost to mental health issues alone to businesses in the UK, that is a massive cost. And I think there's a lot of businesses, be they small or large, maybe don't actually realise that those odd days off unpaid, those first 3 days of any sickness period that you don't pay, granted it doesn't cost you, but it does actually cost you on the bottom line from the business perspective. Yeah. And that's what we thought about.
And what's your take on how that's changed during the pandemic? Has it changed in Chaffin? Do you see it having changed within the wider local economy, people's approach to well-being and mental health?
I think for Chaffin particularly, we always had sort of a bit of a finger on that pulse. We always have had, like I say, in the construction we do. With COVID, I can tell you now we have seen significant instances of, mental health issues. But it's not necessarily work related. It's the other stuff. It's the family stuff. And what I keep sort of saying is, it's life stresses, but wrapped in this lovely insulating blanket of COVID. Yeah. It's just amplifying.
Yes.
That on an everyday basis you'd be able to deal with, but now is just a little too much.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just Chaffin that's seeing that. I think it is prevalent across the UK. And I don't think when COVID hopefully finally ends, we may have a different issue to deal with coming out the other side. Yes. Rather than worried about, everyone sort of self-isolate, that kind of thing, is maybe reintegrating them back into a more social workplace or social lifestyle again. Because, you know, by then we could be looking at a year, 2 years of social distancing, being away from people. So by no means is mental health and well-being going to be off our radar anytime soon as HR.
Yeah. I think you summed it up beautifully with it amplified existing problems. So on that note, I'm going to bring this to an end. It's been delightful. Thank you very much for joining us, especially at short notice. But this is HR in 10, and we've spoken for 10 minutes.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Paula, thanks a lot. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.